Yes.
And then in DC, we have Black Pride, Youth Pride, Trans Pride, and Capital Pride. And Trans Pride is considered an event within the Capital Pride monster, but it happens almost a month before Capital Pride does. It used to be within like a couple of weeks, I think, or maybe even a week apart. And finally, they kind of started spacing them out. And so, it's interesting because for years, I'm with you, Alex, right? Like we were there every year, right? And we tabled and we did this stuff because we were doing DCATs, and my only quote unquote personal involvement in Pride that wasn't DCATs related was at some point you're like, okay, I need a change of scenery because I've been standing behind the table all day, so I'm going to take a lap, right? And you do one lap around Pride, and by the time we got back, I was just like, okay, I'm done taking the lap around Pride. I'm done with Pride.
We've seen all these folks before.
Yeah, exactly. And no matter how big it is, even though, like you said, it gets very impersonal, it's still like the same faces. I mean, not always, right? We're talking about, what is it, almost 500,000 people, right? Yeah. It's the same tables. It's the same kind of deal. And there's very little inclusion when it comes to trans folks and groups. And what I've found is that I don't know whether I would go if it hadn't been for DCATs, right? I probably would have, just to see some friends and to hang out, but that kind of brings me to one of the things that I want to talk about, which is, when we really talk about Pride, right? The origins of it was this riot at Stonewall started by trans women, mostly trans women of color, and I have to ask, I find it hilariously ironic that what we're celebrating is something that was started by trans people, and yet trans people tend to be an afterthought at best in the modern view of Pride, and quite possibly forever. I've been around, for that long to look at, tracking over the decades how that's looked. But I find that ironic, and it almost not almost upsetting, it's upsetting to me, right? Because it's like, I don't get it, dude. It's like, it's almost like thanks for stealing something that we were very much a part of and making us feel like, oh, it's okay, you can come too. No, of course I can come because I have a right to be here. So, I mean, I don't know if any of y'all feel the same way, Tracy.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Eli, but however, it doesn't surprise me,
Mm-hmm.
Our history and our contributions have been erased practically and diminished throughout time, throughout written history. So it doesn't surprise me that something that happened because trans people, trans women, particularly women of color, were at the forefront of Stonewall. It doesn't surprise me that others have come in and claimed that. And like you said, they say, well, you can come too, it's okay. We'll just put you in this little corner, in this little box, and that's okay. So it doesn't surprise me that our history is being twisted once again. However, it's up to us to make sure that our history isn't erased completely, because if it was left up to others, then we would just be these freaks of nature that are just to be tolerated. So it's up to us to let people know that we're not here to be tolerated. We're human beings also. We've contributed to this society. So, no, you're not going to erase our contributions.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
Also that, in the beginning, well, not in the beginning, but, Stonewall and the Pride celebration, that was the first year anniversary of Stonewall, it really was born out of this, being visible, and it was very radical to be visible and out as gay or lesbian or trans. And I think over the years, the movement became more about assimilation with straight people, and in terms of the fight for marriage equality, in terms of being able to serve in the military, and it became about assimilation, I think. And also when HRC was, for the longest time, supporting a version of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act that was not trans inclusive, I think that shows or reflects how the push, the division between trans folks and the LGBT community was really more about assimilation and what would be easier to win in terms of the fight for equality for LGBT folks. So I think the move towards assimilation plays a huge factor in sort of trans people being pushed to the side.
Yeah, I was gonna say something kind of similar. I feel like, I mean, obviously, like, trans people get pushed out, but I think even on a more, on a broader scope, like, there are so many queer people who do, feel excluded from kind of like the HRC vision of Pride. People of color, people who are broke, people who are, not skinny Twinkie white boys. Sort of thing is like how welcoming there are so many queer spaces, and I don't think Pride is maybe not as bad as some of them, but there definitely does feel like there is a hierarchy, and skinny fit gay cis white boys are at the top. Bonus points if you've got a fair amount of cash. So,
yes, absolutely.
So like that's. Like, trans people are race, but also, like, the whole thing at this point is so, like, it feels very corporate, it feels very HRC, it feels very, lobbying support groups in, military defense contracting companies sort of thing. That it's almost like, it's like if you just interjected back, the trans part, like, you're already so far away from, like, the original kind of impetus for Stonewall.
Right.
I guess that's an improvement, but it's not a huge improvement.
Right, absolutely. So that kind of brings me, to have we lost the real reason for Pride, right? I kind of look at Pride as two different entities, both working hand in hand to keep that, as you said, Alex, that giant monolith, to keep it rolling. Is that, are we really celebrating our community and its existence? Or is this just a giant drunk party, for those people that drink, but is this just a giant party for the goers, right, the attendees, and a giant platform for corporations? Because the thing that kills me about the corporatization is not just that it exists, it's that really what a lot of times corporations are just using Pride as an advertising space to grow their customer base without ever contributing back to the community. Now, I'm not saying that all of those companies, none of them contribute back, but there's a fair number of people that, their companies go there, and it's just like, I just want to show you that we're cool with gay people because that's better for the bottom line, right? And that'll get more customers, it will get more money in the door, but by the way, I'm not going to hand any more of this money back to the community when you need it.
Or hire you.
Right. Well, that's for certain, particularly when it comes to the trans population.
Amen.
Yeah.
So our, this corporatization of Pride, like, Melvin, you were one of the first people that mentioned it. Obviously, we're all talking about this, but I would like to, I want to hear your take. Like, I want to know, like, what, and if it's what disgusts you or what you think that would be better if we could change X, Y, Z, or like, what is it like about the corporatization that just kind of gets under your skin?
Well, I think just with the historical context that we've been talking about, how it came out of the community, how it was celebrating visibility and it was very radical. I think what's really getting under my skin about it is that it's become the total opposite now. It's become about assimilation. It's become about corporatization. It's become about money. And it's lost its focus, and it doesn't connect. It doesn't connect to me anymore. I think it's just it doesn't feel like it's my event. It just feel like it's for people like me. And so when Pride season comes around, I look for other events. I look for other events that are about the community, that are created by people of color, by trans folks. Spaces where I will feel like, hey, this is for someone like me.
Yeah. So this, and that's the other thing. Okay, so when we're talking about corporatization versus what we originally needed, right? We're talking about visibility. Okay, so that was one of the things that we talked about, was like the genesis of, like, it was celebrating what this radical notion of being exactly who you are and being upfront and open and in public about that, right? So what's so frustrating is the fact that because of this corporatization, the cost of simply being there in order to be out and I'm not talking about the people that walk in the door, although as soon as you walk into DC Pride, I don't know if it's this way in other cities, the first thing that you're asked for is a donation, right? And it's like, trust me, Capital Pride doesn't need any more of my money. And even if they did, I have no more left for you. I don't know what to tell you, right? But when we talk about, I'm not just talking about the folks that are walking in the door, I'm talking about if you're going to have a tabling festival, and if a good portion of those tables are supposed to be so that people can get their issues out there, their groups, so that they can show folks, hey, we exist, and by the way, if you need somebody to talk to, this is where we are, right? That's one of many types of groups. Well, the problem is that when you've got so many dang people fighting for those spaces, small groups like that cannot compete with the prices that a corporation can to have a space at Pride. Like DC Pride, so Alex, you handled the books with DCATS the entire time that you and I were running the group. How often did Capital Pride increase its prices for tables?
I feel like I think it's kind of capped out. Actually, give me just a sec. Let me go see if I can pull up the spreadsheet. Got spreadsheets for everything.
Spreadsheets for everything. Tracy, go ahead.
Just for transparency, I must be honest to admit that here locally with the Pride in October, under the leadership of Buck Cook and now Jamie Ferguson, they've been generous to trans organizations in the past, and they've donated table space for organizations that are unable to pay for those high prices for the
right.
and the spaces. So I must be honest and say that they're making an effort, and they understand that most of the funding doesn't come to the trans organizations. Most people do not want to donate to trans organizations for whatever reasons. So I'm happy to say that the Atlanta Pride Committee has been very generous with donating space for groups of trans people, trans organizations.
And see, that's what we need more of, right? We need not only for cis folks to join with us, obviously, in this fight, but also the fact that the more that we can talk about this and realize, I'm not even sure you've even noticed it, right, for some cities. And so when I hear about other prides that do that, what that makes me want to do is support your pride more, right? And so that is awesome. Thank you for telling me that, because even though I'm 2 hours away, that's a pride that I want to be at. Because if you are supporting my community, then I will support your event that you're supporting. You know what I mean? So thank you, Tracy, for saying that, because that's something that's got to happen, right? Not obviously, for those of our listeners, we're not saying that nope, Pride it's done. Like there's no way we can come back from this. We can always change something, and that's a start to start to make space for groups that can't have it. Because in Augusta's a very small Pride, right? And I'm going to be, tabling at the Augusta Pride this year. And when you look at the breakdown of what your options are for paying for tables, okay, you are either a nonprofit and you have to have paperwork and you have to prove it, right? You are a registered nonprofit. That's one cost. Or you're a nonprofit that's going to sell things. Well, that's a little bit higher, obviously, if you're going to merchandise. Or if you're selling food, like if you're a food or drink vendor, and then everyone else is lumped under a merchandise table. So a tiny social and support group, okay, made up of, 10, 20 people, all of whom are scraping by, trying to keep a job, trying to pay rent. Part of the reason, one of the things you said, Tracy, about people don't donate to trans organizations, we also, oftentimes when we're members, can't donate because of all of the we're broke, and I'm not saying that other people aren't as well. Right. But so what I'm up against, what we're up against as a small group is we are charged the same for a table as any company that comes in and is going to set up shop and just sell a ton of merchandise. Because we are not a registered nonprofit, a nonprofit that does huge fundraising. Okay, so let's just say, for example, like an HRC. An HRC is going to pay less for their table at a Pride like Augusta than a tiny group that does no fundraising and isn't registered as a nonprofit. Now, that does not make sense.
Well, to me, Pride represents the grassroots, the
right.
people who don't have those corporate sponsorships. That's what I think of when I think of Pride, what it should be. And,
right.
Like all the corporations come in and they make it difficult because they have so much money, they can pay whatever they're asked and required. And for smaller organizations like what you were saying, Eli, don't have that